Welcome, fellow Rotarians and guests, to this important Downtown Rotary meeting. Let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to now welcome up Rotarian Rick Melmer, who will facilitate today's invocation.
Thank you, Jason. Would you join me in prayer? Heavenly Father, we're grateful for today. Thank you for the change of seasons and the blessing of the weather that we're enjoying now. We're grateful, Lord, for our health. Thank you for the optimism that surrounds us right now as we're getting healthier as a community and as a state. We're grateful for the freedoms that we enjoy, an opportunity to meet and gather free of any restrictions. We're grateful for that. And also thankful, Lord, that we're fearfully and wonderfully made. And we're going to celebrate that today with a discussion on diversity, and we thank you for the folks that are with us today to do that. Grateful, Lord, for the food that we're about to eat and our time of fellowship. We ask all this in your name. Amen.
Thank you very much, Rick. Thank you, everybody, for being here. What a beautiful Easter weekend that just finished up, and here we are on another wonderful day. No doubt that the weather will change on us, we know, but for the time being, we are very grateful and thankful for today's beautiful weather. I would now like to take a moment and welcome all of our guests today. If you could all please stand and be recognized. Very good. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. I also want to thank the Downtown Rotary members for their efforts to recruit new members to this organization that we all very much appreciate and are thankful for. We started the Rotary year around July 1st with approximately 270-ish members. And with the recruitment efforts on the part of all of you, those that have joined since then and that we have currently in the pipeline for new applications, we are going to pass 300 by a pretty clear margin. So the growth of this club, despite the challenges that COVID has brought us, has maintained and has actually accelerated. So thank you all for your efforts to recruit important new members to this organization. Now we get to induct a couple new members. I'd like to invite up Tony Knorr, who will introduce our first new member, Kira Kimball.
Good afternoon, fellow Rotarians, and just say thank you to President Jason for his leadership through this year, and past President Jesse Schmidt. It's been quite a year, but it's fun to be at a spot where we've not only survived but thrived through it, and have the good fortune to welcome a new Rotarian today, and that is Kira Kimball, standing right next to me. I've got to know Kira over the last number of years, and have just really appreciated her view and how she shares her passion with those in our community in serving on various boards, and throughout our community she has already made a significant impact, and I would include myself in that. Different things that I've learned from her and people that I've met has really gone a long way in my journey to continue to learn and grow in all things diversity and what it takes to build a strong community. With that, I'm going to let Kira tell you a little bit more about herself, the work she does at Marsh McLennan Agency, and the work she also does in this community to help us move forward. Please welcome Kira Kimball.
Thank you so much, Tony. I'm honored to become part of such an esteemed group. When business does community, we all really win, and I know that's a big focus of being a Rotarian. I am the Chief Innovation Officer for Marsh and McLennan Agency here in town. We are a risk management organization and an employee health and benefits consulting firm. And in my role locally, I lead diversity, equity, and inclusion, brand marketing, visibility, and community relations and engagement. Nationally, I lead our diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy, which brings me great joy to have the honor of leading that effort. And I'm so excited to be joined by some colleagues on the stage today to share a little bit more about diversity, equity, and inclusion and why it's so important for us in our workplaces to really engage in these practices. I'm from South Dakota. I was born in Huron, South Dakota, left for a while and came back to Sioux Falls about 20 years ago, and definitely love this community. So thank you very much. And Tony, thank you so much for nominating me.
Thank you, Kira. We look forward to your membership and getting to know you more in the future. The next new member induction, I would like to invite up Nathan Stallinga, who will introduce Kevin Jurgensen.
Thank you, President Jason and fellow Rotarians. Honored to welcome Kevin and introduce him today. Going to read a little bit about Kevin. Try not to add too much. Kevin moved to Sioux Falls in August of '92, just as Sioux Falls was getting plenty of national attention in trade magazines as being a great place to live and work. He came to be a sales manager at Century Business Product for Dave and Mary Tidwell. There they grew the business from 3 locations to 5. In 2003, he and his partners bought the business. Since then, they have executed 7 acquisitions and now have 10 locations over 3 states and employ 65 people. In addition to being one of the owners, his role is that of the Chief Sales Officer. Kevin was born and raised in Albert Lea, Minnesota, but he's proud to call himself a South Dakotan and calls Sioux Falls home. Kevin is an active member of SME and is a past president of that group. He currently serves as a board member of VOA Dakotas. He and his wife, Cameryn, live in eastern Sioux Falls, and for nearly 15 years had the great pleasure of having the best neighbor in the city of Sioux Falls. It wasn't me. They have 2 children and 3 grandchildren. They enjoy spending time downtown in the summer and supporting Sioux Falls Storm, Stampede Hockey, Augustana Athletics. Please help me welcome Kevin Jurgensen to Downtown Rotary.
Thank you. Nathan has said just tell a few words why you wanted to be, join the club. And it was really because he wanted to dress up in a suit and have another photo opportunity. So we hardly see him in the press, do we? We hardly see him. But actually, as Nathan said, Sioux Falls has been very good to me. Very proud to call South Dakota home. Dave Tidwell is a past member of this group. He was one that recruited me to come to Sioux Falls from Mason City, Iowa in 1992. Brought me to a meeting then. I've been to a couple others to invite, but I believe that the time is only right if you have the time to serve and be part of the community. Enjoy my time with VOA and also my time with SME and the leadership and Bernie and Rod as well and some others that I see here from SME. So want to just continue to give back to the community that's given me so much personally and also professionally. My wife and I just got back from a 2-week vacation. I was sharing with the table as you are at a resort and just kind of relaxing, you start talking to some other people. And asked a couple where they were from, and they said Maryland. They asked me where I was from, and I said South Dakota. First thing they said, not how are you or anything else, but we love Kristi Noem. First thing out of their mouth. So it was like, oh, whether you agree or not, obviously we're getting some national attention. Did go on to talk to some other people about, Sioux Falls is not that good kept secret anymore. So made me proud and knew that I was making the right decision to continue that with joining a group as prestigious as the Rotarians. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kevin. And I think I speak for all of us. We do not want to be a well-kept secret anymore. Now for today's program. It is a great privilege to have the esteemed panelists. Cindy Peterson will be moderating today. I would like to now read the bios of four of our panelists. Let's begin with Kira. Kira Kimball leads Pathways to Inclusive and Equitable Workplaces, a new nonprofit that provides education to businesses on DE&I best practices for the workplace. She is the Chief Innovation Officer of Marsh McLennan Agency for Sioux Falls and Fargo offices and leads the organization's national DE&I strategy. Welcome, Kira Kimball. Tamien Dysart is the CEO and co-founder of Think3D. In addition to working directly with businesses to help improve their organizational cultures, they lead a community-focused leadership development program called Leaders of Tomorrow, aimed at raising up our next generation of leaders with a specific emphasis of including and lifting our city's diverse backgrounds to mirror the demographic mix we see coming out of our school system. Cameryn Friesz is a board member of Pathways to Inclusive and Equitable Workplaces, a nonprofit that provides education to businesses on DE&I best practices for the workplace. She is a vice president at U.S. Bank, where she manages a team of anti-money laundering, compliance quality assurance analysts responsible for reviewing the compliance with international AML requirements. As a founding board member of U.S. Bank's Risk Management and Compliance Multicultural Leadership Development Program, their mission is to engage, develop, and advance the success of multicultural risk professionals by increasing visibility and creating a community where all can be seen, heard, and reach their full potential. And finally, Jeff Griffin has served as president and CEO of the Greater Sioux Falls Chamber of Commerce since January of 2020. Jeff has over 25 years of executive experience in the nonprofit management in both chambers and adolescent treatment centers. As a Chamber of Commerce president, Jeff works with the board of directors to establish vision and program initiatives to best serve the nearly 2,000 business members. The Chamber's core focus is fostering connections, advocating for business, and building a strong community. The Chamber's defined pillars are business leadership, agribusiness, Experience Sioux Falls, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. Please join me in welcoming these esteemed guests.
Well, hello, Rotarians, and welcome. What happened now? And she's going down before she even gets started.
It moves so much.
Are we good? Okay.
Did anybody else notice that?
We were nervous.
I'm sorry.
Well, now I'm nervous. But
No,
we're
no,
good.
you're good now.
Good. Hi, everybody,
got
and thank
four
you
on the
all for
floor.
being on today's panel. I'm just personally really thrilled that you're going to be with us today and to spend this time with probably one of my favorite hours every single week. So thank you again for being with us today. We're going to go through some questions. I'm not going to ask everybody to answer every question so we can get through a lot of different topics, but certainly if I didn't address you specifically, but you have something to add, just jump right in so that we can all enjoy our time together. But Kira, I'm making eye contact with you because I'm going to call on you first. What is DE&I? Describe its evolution from conversations that many of us have been used to having, just talking about diversity.
DE&I. D is for diversity, and that really stands for the unique characteristics that each of us present with. And oftentimes we think about race or ethnicity, but truly it is much broader than that. Race, ethnicity, gender, gender identity, age, ability, sexual orientation, religion or spirituality, mental health, our geography, our dialect, and Cindy, I could continue. So it's important for us to know that we all have characteristics in our identity of diversity. Equity stands for E. Equity is different from equality. Equity is creating equal access to opportunity, to protections, to safeguards, to wealth, to jobs, to housing, to healthcare, and the list goes on. And with equity, it's really important to do the work of removing barriers that get in the way. Because the reality is, each of us does not have the same starting line in life. And that's a conversation for another day on privilege. But equity is about removing barriers so all people have access and opportunity to the things I listed. Inclusion. Inclusion is really about creating a culture and an environment, and we think about workplaces or communities that is going to facilitate and foster a real sense of belonging so that each of us can show up with our intersections of diversity and we feel affirmed, valued, we feel seen, but we also are invited to the table, not to be a listening party, but to impart our own ideas, our own beliefs, and really help with the strategy for a business, where we might go for new products, where we might go for new markets, and creating a space for all of your employees to be able to have that conversation. How it's changed? When I started this work in the 90s, it was about multiculturalism and sensitivity training, and it was really thinking about the other individual. How it's transpired is we start in thinking about ourselves in terms of unconscious bias or conscious bias, developing cultural competencies so we can navigate and facilitate individuals who might have a different worldview or experience or belief than we do. And that's our opportunity now as a community.
Well, and let's jump right in with the why. Tamien, you're a business owner. Why should DE&I be important to the business leaders in Sioux Falls?
Great question. I think historically, again, it's interesting hearing Kira say, back to the 90s, because again, that conversation has been around now for 30 plus years. And I think here, as our community continues to evolve, we have 20% diversity in our community overall. We have 40% coming out of our school system. We know that our demographic is changing rapidly. I was having a conversation recently with Dave Fleechek, and we were talking about back in 1990 when I was still in school, it was 5%, and so the shunt of it just kind of snuck up on us, but our demographic of our customer is different, it's changing. And so if our workforce doesn't reflect the diversity of our community, are we really in touch with the customer? And especially in today's economy, now that we're talking about global economy, we're talking about so many barriers are being broken down, it goes beyond just being the right thing to do, it's the best thing to do. Right? It's good for business. It's going beyond just, again, some of the things that Kara talked about. It's diversity of thought. Because, again, in that groupthink, that central way of thinking, diversity of thought, you need to know how other people are thinking to understand their perspective. And that just adds value to the overall conversation. As a community who continues to grow and be on the list of great places to live, et cetera, how do we start to lead the way in this topic? And so I think it's important in all the assets that we have and all the folks who are committed to make Sioux Falls great, knowing that our demographic is changing, how do we show and be the leader in this space of DE&I in a community of our size and with our history?
I love it. For each of you, as part of the business community in various capacities, how does Tamien's response resonate with each of you? Do you agree? Does it cover it? What else do we need to hear about why this is important for the business community?
I'll go. That sounds like something I should answer. So a Chamber of Commerce, I believe, and the folks in my volunteer leadership believe as well, which is much of what attracted me to take this job in Sioux Falls, which we love being in Sioux Falls, is to be the intersection of business and politics and community. And that's a messy area sometimes when you get into advocacy and special projects and current events and so forth. But if you go to our website and look at our public policy statements, there is one on diversity there. And to paraphrase it, it talks about embracing diversity and the growing diversity in our community, and even specifies we will oppose policies that discriminate. And how that is stated on paper and then how it's carried out when you have nearly 2,000 business members who employ 80,000 people, there's not always agreement within our group. But which is why it makes it even more important to discuss, because I've yet to have it explained to me. Sometimes we're told, well, the chamber should be a chamber. But I don't know where the light of community stops shining and business starts shining, because the most successful business owners I've always known have wanted their employees to be happy and healthy and their communities to be the same. And more, as was discussed with Tamien and Kira, the demographics of our community, the future of the workforce in Sioux Falls is going to be diverse. So the employers who prepare themselves for that, and not as an obligation, but to embrace that opportunity, we believe are going to be the most successful in the long run as the face of being an employer, and for the customer-facing face that they're welcoming as well.
Cameryn, how do those responses resonate with you, and what else would you like to share about why this is important for the business community?
You know, I think the one point that we haven't covered yet is the financial impact.
Okay.
And there's always a business case. And I think, as Tamien pointed out, that, you know, if you can resonate with your customer, they're going to want to come to you. And so what comes to mind as each of them spoke was, historically and growing up, I was raised with the golden rule. And the golden rule is no longer the ultimate rule. I mean, it's the platinum rule, to treat others how they want to be treated. And implementing diversity, equity, and inclusion into your workforce helps for you to implement that mindset into your company. And when your employees are happy, they want to come to work. When they're happy, the customer sees that they're happy and they're able to service them. And ultimately, that rolls back in revenue.
I think if you just add, I mean, if you study that out, the top 10% companies, most successful companies in the U.S. are doing DE&I really well. The bottom 10% aren't doing it really well. So to add on to the financial impact, it makes sense for the right reasons, but also it's the best reason.
Kira, anything you would want to add?
It is an employer differentiator, and when we're thinking about attracting talent, not just from our community, but from around the region and the country, showing up as an employer who values diversity, equity, and inclusion can really position you as being an attractive employer. ZipRecruiter says that 86% of those individuals who are looking for work are looking for an employer who values DE&I. So when we commit to that, we're going to show up to the marketplace for prospective employees in a way that's going to attract them there. Secondly, from an economic development perspective, when we think about our state and our community, if we can be a beacon to the rest of the country, and I might argue the world, that Sioux Falls, South Dakota knows how to do equity and inclusion in the workplace, businesses from around the country, when we think of the coasts, they may feel like this is the place we want to transfer our business. We might want to bring our headquarters or a second location. So not only an employer differentiator, but a community differentiator as well.
Makes sense. Cameryn, how did you get involved in DE&I? Why is it so important to you?
That's a really funny question. I don't think I realized my whole life how much DEI was a part of me. And then I went to a conference in New York City called the Women's National Multicultural Convention. Naively, I showed up thinking I was going to be there with a bunch of people with diverse, physically, perspective. And it wasn't. It was everybody. And it was so enlightening to me. And it was like a light bulb went off. And I thought, okay, so I was coming to this multicultural conference, and I thought I'm going to be here with other people that look like me, that have had the same experience as me. And it was so enlightening to see those who looked and had the same experiences really didn't have the same perspective. And those who maybe looked different and had different experiences had a very similar perspective of me. And it helped me to see that sharing each of our perspectives and not coming to the assumption that things are all the same from what you see or what you know about a person is really important for us to talk about. And as in my current role at US Bank, managing a team of international testing analysts, we work with a lot of different time zones. So that's a diverse aspect that we have to physically think about in our job every day. What time are we scheduling a meeting with these people in Europe? Let's not do it at 3 p.m. because they're in bed. You know, I mean, it's a simple concept. So thinking about diversity, equity, and inclusion isn't just one piece of the puzzle, but it's how you physically run your day. And so how I got into it triggered this conference. And as I started going to more and more meetings and having conversations with my team, I physically knew differences about them, but we weren't talking about it. We just weren't talking about it. We were avoiding the differences. And one day I just said, okay, we need to talk about the differences. We need to talk about them. We need to embrace them, because that's when we're going to have the most success, so we can see and understand each other better. And from there, our team has just rocketed off with success. And I was fortunate to meet Kira through some other individuals, and I just haven't been able to get myself out of it. I've just dove in deeper.
Just curious, what was that first meeting like when you brought it up, and I mean, how did that room react to you?
I have a lot of introvert teammates. And I am not an introvert myself. I never have been. So they know that I'm extrovert. And I did take the time to say, we're going to have some really uncomfortable conversations in our team meetings. So one-on-one, I took each of them aside in our weekly meetings and said, we're going to have some uncomfortable conversations. I need to know what you're comfortable with, so that they could know that they're part of the conversation if they just really wanted to sit and listen and learn, or they can be part of the conversation if they want to physically and verbally participate, but that I'm welcoming them to the table, so that the door was open if they were ready, and if they were not ready, that I'll be ready when they are.
So taking that extra time to make it safe for them, and they got to define what that word was.
Yeah.
Made all the difference.
Yeah.
That's a neat story. Jeff, you came to Sioux Falls to lead our chamber after being very successful in Peoria. What did the conversations about DE&I sound like and look like there? And what can Sioux Falls learn from that?
Well, I'll answer that not just in terms of Peoria. I get the chance to work with chambers across the country, and especially during the pandemic, the diversity, equity, and inclusion conversation as it's become more robust. I get to see different pockets of our country and how they're reacting. Well, first of all, Sioux Falls is fortunate to have some resources and some momentum through the years that when you have resources, it seems that solutions are a little more attainable, but the fact that the community's found the solutions has provided the resources, so you have that nice energy going. When you get into some of the communities that are struggling with it, the finger pointing, or like I said, the obligatory nature of this exercise seems to take over, and that's the biggest challenge, I think, wherever in the nation we're working, but focusing on us, there's so much noise nationally and internationally, and we have a responsibility to take care of Sioux Falls. And I'm not saying we shouldn't care about the rest of the world, but I also believe by caring for ourselves, that can permeate out to others. So Sioux Falls has an opportunity now to prevent problems that some other larger communities are having that could arise 30 years from now. And I think that's important generational work that we're able to plug into right now, right this moment. You mentioned Peoria, whether it be Peoria or other communities. Not everybody has, not doing a timely plug here, I really believe this. The Forward Sioux Falls campaign and its tradition is going on now, obviously. But we've made this part of the campaign. We have a Center for Innovation and Excellence, which the programming is yet to be completely defined, but the discussions with the investors is around this topic. How are we a welcoming, diverse community? And Kira did a nice job of listing how long that list is. I have an adult son who's on the autism spectrum, and he works at Showplace. And Showplace has been a magnificent employer to get him on board, and he loves his job there. We have all these resources. We need workers. We need workers, whatever their diverse background is, we need those workers here. So in comparisons to other communities, again, to have a low unemployment rate and a strong job participation rate makes us very enviable to other communities for solutions we're able to get the seeds planted now.
Well, and we'll definitely get to jump into the Forward Sioux Falls piece during our time today. So hold on to that. We'll get to hear a little bit more about it. But right now, Kara, tell us about Pathways. Dive us deep into Pathways. What the catalyst for it, how folks like Cameryn got involved. Just fill us in.
Absolutely. So a couple years ago, once my firm, Marsh and McLennan Agency, decided to commit to becoming a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive organization, based on my local role, I thought this isn't just important for my 6'4" firm down in Sharapa Place, this is important for the community in which I live. And I had about 8 months worth of coffees and lunches, and I'm looking out, and many of you were those coffee and lunch dates, basically asking the question, is diversity, equity, and inclusion important to our community? Is it important to your workplace? And do you know how to do this work? Resounding, everyone said, yes, this is super important, and cutting to the chase, but we don't know how to do it. So after all of those conversations, I emailed all of the folks with whom I spoke and said, this is what I've heard from you. I want to do something. Who wants to join me? And out of that conversation, I think about 15 people raised their hands. I'm seeing some friends who were original founders who raised their hands. And we came together and we essentially ideated for about 3 months about who are we going to be? What are we going to do? And what are we going to accomplish? And that's when we stood up. We're going to be Pathways to Inclusive and Equitable Workplaces. And we are going to provide education to employers who want to lean in on doing this work. And initially, we did a test case, if you will, last summer with a 6-part webinar series to see how employers might engage with us. We have about 500 followers so far. We did that through my firm. But now, then Jeff came to us, I don't know, August, September, and said, I'm interested in learning more. And how could maybe Pathways partner with the chamber so we could make a bigger impact? And that's really where we are now. While we've done some initiatives this fall and winter, continuing with our followers and our audience, what we're excited to kick off is really a DE&I Summit coming up in this month, next week, and also a DE&I Activator series to come alongside all of you and all of you who are phoning in or Zooming or Facebooking in so we can support you. So we're a volunteer group. We're officially a nonprofit with a tax ID number and a checking account and things that we're all learning how to do starting this up. But other than the 15 initial founders, we've got about 28 businesses who've joined with us, many of whom are DE&I educators like myself and are prepared and equipped to support you. So we're hitting the ball out into the field and hoping you're going to catch it and throw it back to us and do something really incredible in our community.
Cameryn, how did you get involved, and when did you know that Pathways was special and that it was going to work?
Oh, that's a really good question. I got involved with Pathways. I actually initially met Kira about a year ago exactly, just before the COVID lockdown in Sioux Falls. And we had said, you know, we should do lunch or we should have coffee, and ended up meeting up with one of her other co-founders of Pathways and did a coffee and kind of started talking about, you know, some things that I was really passionate about and how much this community has really raised me as an individual and as a professional through different firms that I've been with or companies that I've worked through, as well as extracurricular activities that I've been in, you know, that the community has really supported me personally, and I've always felt supported. So how can we help others to feel supported like I was so fortunate to have? So I ended up having some conversations and then joined Pathways, like she said, through some coffee conversations, and joined one of the first meetings last summer. And I could tell right away it was grassroots, which for me was really exciting because I like to kind of dig in and dive and start to really create and think about what have we not thought about that we can lift up here. And as a risk manager, I felt like I could use that skill set too in this group. So I started joining in the summer of last year and started listening in on some of the conversations, and just the passion of every single member of Pathways was really inspiring to me. And how I've been able to learn from each of them through each of the meetings that we've had. And Kira is such a phenomenal leader of this group that it's hard to not want to follow her in Pathways. And she's brought on so many amazing educators of DEI that me even have learned so many different things in, you know, in ways that we can implement it, and where areas where I've gone wrong that I've been able to sit and reflect and go, I didn't even know about that perspective or that angle. I should educate myself a bit more on that as I'm going forward. So that's really kind of how I got pulled into it and involved, and then yeah, we just officially became a nonprofit this year. And that's where it brings us here today.
I think that's awesome just to hear that is, you have a couple dozen folks now emerging around the same topic, and you guys are learning from each other in that space. And so when you think about the benefit Pathways is to our community, again, I applaud you guys for the work that you do, and I believe in it so much, but as you guys are sharpening each other, how much that's going to reflect into our community now, again, to be that central resource that, again, folks could really get behind, because, again, before it didn't exist. And so, again, truly behind the name of showing that pathway. So I think it's awesome to hear iron sharpening iron, which then sharpens our community. So I applaud you guys.
You get
One
this? Oh,
thing.
go ahead, Jeff.
I want to, I was thinking of something as they were talking about the chamber partnering with Pathways and your question about other communities. We have a tremendous amount of resources in our membership. So one thing the board wanted to be mindful about is, let's not start a new, it was an idea, let's start a new office and say, okay, Lisa, you're in charge of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Some chambers and communities are doing that. And in the right workplace, universities, it seems to work sometimes, but overall for a community chamber job, that job's not working out so well to have it, because it has to be everybody's work. So in the opportunity, and Kira said I came to her, the first week I was here, she was in my office, I know that, which I appreciate. So, but I saw the list of folks and businesses that she got going on this. And that's when we can be our best, is to use our members and community resources already and maybe mobilize that, and in this case, launch that CEO Business Leaders Summit and a whole year long of programming, and then get it baked in so that we have some longer term program dollars. Because the last thing we want to be viewed as is we have all the answers. Our answers are in, assembling the resources the community has, and this is a perfect opportunity to do that. And it's not easy, I can tell you. Kira and I, we're getting this moving along because we're open and honest with each other, because when you're working with different sets of volunteers, you stub your toe along the way, and I've appreciated Pathways' ability to listen to my feedback, and hopefully they appreciate my ability to listen to feedback as well. And you slog through this, because it's tough work for certain.
Well, you use the word slog through, but I'm also feeling a synergy. That word's coming to mind as I'm listening to all of you talk about the parts that you're playing into taking this important topic forward. And Tamien, you're a board member on the chamber, but you're also a business owner and pretty involved in bridging the gap. And that speaks to one of Pathways' pillars. Tell this group about bridging the gap. What is its intent, and why did you take on such a big initiative?
I think for many of us, right, when you see a need, you have the ability to kind of step in and fill that gap to the best of your ability. You want to do something about it. And obviously, Bonnie and I have been doing work with Leaders of Tomorrow, which I think many of you have heard or are familiar with. But especially over the last year, we saw the greater need in our community. Again, as we ask ourselves with our business community, is our business community in a position? Are they ready to again create that pathway of inclusivity and equity within the workplace? We knew there was work to be done, and again, to Jeff's point, why replicate something brand new? We wanted to support what Pathways was doing because they have an excellent team. They are the experts in that space around educating in this space. We knew there was a pillar around storytelling. Again, I'll go back to last summer when the George Floyd incident happened, and we saw some things happen in our community. I think it was easy for our community to gravitate to what's happening nationally when we don't have a very clear and present stance on what we are doing. What are we actively doing here? We talk about and Think 3D all the time. What are the artifacts, right? We can say this is important, but what are the artifacts that in action that's showing that this topic is important? And then when we talk about leadership development, it's important, I think, beyond what we say and beyond our intentions, it's important that the folks who are coming up, this 40% diversity in our school system, that they see people that come from similar backgrounds. I'm not naive the fact that though I'm a person of color, I don't know what it's like being an immigrant or refugee in this community, right? So I'm still different in that space. And so again, when we get curious and you say, how can we help bridge those gaps? We know these things are there. And so as a community member, again, a lifelong resident of Sioux Falls, how do we help us get to that place of thriving? And that's only going to come when we start to take clear and present action steps. So we set out to raise some funding so we could help support, be a supporter of Pathways, to help support Leaders of Tomorrow, to help provide our own story of what's happening in our community, dive into the communities who are underserved and provide resources to help uplift and empower to build that ladder of success for those who want to climb it. Because a lot of folks who are coming up, even though they want better, they don't know what's the next step. If all they see in their sphere with their friend groups and their parents they just know hard work. Well, they don't know that there's good banks out there and there's good organizations that says, we want to help show you the pathways to these things. And so I think holistically, we know that Sioux Falls is a phenomenal place to live, but we also know very clear and presently we have gaps. And so really asking the question, bridging the gap, is really kind of that space between intention. We have good intention in our community. We have a lot of great people with good intention. And we know we have outcomes that we're trying to get to, but you only bridge that gap through action, right? That's how you bridge the gap between those things. So I think that's why it's important to uplift organizations who are doing a great job in the space they are, and also say what else can be done to help close the gaps in these other spaces that have been underserved historically.
Do you feel that that gap is coming together more and more?
I do. I'm energized. Again, I'll say last summer why we took the step beyond just the Leaders of Tomorrow to a bigger endeavor of bridging the gap is never before have I heard, how can I help? Again, being someone who born and raised in Sioux Falls, I was, again, amongst a very small minority in the school system. I stood there when we had the march downtown during the day on that Sunday afternoon. I had my 11-year-old daughter on my shoulders, and I stood never more proud of my community at that moment to see the diversity. There was every color, all backgrounds, different races, saying like, unity, and saying like, we know that we are willing to take a step forward. And so hearing so many folks from the business communities, folks who have contributed and really said, we're gonna put our money where our mouth is, we're gonna put our time and resources where our mouth is. I've never felt more of a momentum to say, people are behind moving this forward because it's beyond, again, the right thing to do. We see that vision of what Sioux Falls can be, and people are passionate about seeing us step into our potential.
This work is hard. Why do you think, Cameryn, the topic of DE&I is hard, and what keeps business leaders from embracing it or taking that first step forward?
Well, I think it's always been that topic that you just don't mention. You know, so I'd go back to some of my previous statements about those uncomfortable conversations that, you know, a lot of those, like the diverse topics are things that it's uncomfortable to address our differences. And think about, you know, the people that you relate to in your communities or in your neighborhoods, your extracurricular activities, you relate to them because you have something in common. So what's the most challenging is relating to somebody that you have nothing in common with, you know, but having nothing in common isn't a bad thing. It's just a fact. It's just a difference, you know? And understanding and relating to people and learning more about the differences really just helps us to collaborate with others better and to understand, you know, different things that might be a challenge for somebody that I wouldn't have a challenge for myself. Maybe I should think about that as I'm implementing this process or as I'm writing this job description. So, you know, that's where I think that it's really important just to embrace that it's okay to say, this is really uncomfortable, and to just have those conversations and open up the discussion.
Jeff, the Greater Sioux Falls Chamber of Commerce's mission statement reads, as the leading Sioux Falls area business advocate, we represent our members by advancing and promoting the economic health and quality of life of the region. How does DE&I fit into the economic health and quality of life in our community?
Right. Well, I'll reiterate some of what's already been mentioned. You look at the high school graduation diversity, and that's our workforce. And I love the work we're doing. I'm a 50-year-old guy, and I have a 15-year-old daughter who's a sophomore at Washington High School. I don't want to take the air out of the room, but she thinks of diversity way differently than the way we're talking about it. That's not good or bad, but it's growth. And you know, that's why I talk about the seeds we can plant now are going to benefit the future of our workforce. So you have the workforce. We need people moving here. So we need people to feel welcome in moving here so they have opportunities, and we can plug them into areas where they're comfortable. And Tamien well pointed out, you know, not every person of color has the same, Paul pointed out by everyone. Sometimes we latch on to that easiest common denominator of, well, he's this, he must be that. Well, you know, you might be surprised to know I'm the grandson of an Italian immigrant. My mom's maiden name is Pachi, and I married a Dominican who's the daughter of Dominicans. Well, that works out well, right? Immigrant, first generation. So my kids, when it comes time to do the census, they have all kinds of, what boxes do we check here? And that's the thing I hope we can avoid, and I see that we are, is avoiding just checking a box here. Because if we just get behind our notions that we know, or we're scared of the national debate. We don't have to worry about all that. We need to worry about solving the problem for your business, for our community. And that leads, that's what I said before, I don't know where being business leader, it doesn't make us immune from talking about the entire community. And that's what I love about my job, is we get to be part of the entire community. And coming out of Pier in the session, you know, we got into that trap a little bit, quite honestly. We were accused by some of being too far out of the business lane. Well, I feel quite comfortable where we were in our positions in Pier. Taking the transgender bill, for example, that's definitely an economic consequence to our community should such, you know, there was a lot in that bill besides just the headline. So when you're vacationing somewhere and they recognize South Dakota for that, you know, when CNN called last week, Jenny, Deborah, and I said, hey, feel free to call about the good news of South Dakota sometimes too, you know. There's a lot to celebrate in how we're growing. And I'm afraid sometimes we latch on to what we're comfortable with, and that impedes our ability to grow. But overwhelmingly, this community, and I know there are a lot of transplants here, but speaking on behalf of myself, I find it to be a very welcoming, open-minded community. And I think that speaks to the solutions that have been put in place over the years to give those flexibilities. But, you know, we know there's going to be challenges over this 11-month activator series, and I know my phone's going to ring with pros and cons, and I welcome that because it's all part of that. Because I think what also happens sometimes is an employer will do 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and then somebody will call and say, "Why aren't you doing 6?" And I think, man, anybody notice what I'm doing 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5? And they need opportunity for their growth as well to make this all work well.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful. And Tamien, you're a chamber board member. How does DE&I fit into the chamber's priorities from your perspective, and what kind of conversations did you have about this topic and the chamber's role from a board level?
Honestly, that was one of the things that attracted me when I was kind of invited into the process when they were selecting this current round of board members. And I can tell you again, Jeff from the beginning was in the entire chamber was saying, we don't want just diversity in terms of ethnicity, but in gender, but diversity of business, because that whole thought of, again, how do you help folks come from different backgrounds to be better as a whole? And, you know, again, as we advance into the community, as Jeff was saying, this is an economic impact. You know, when you can't separate the two, right? The better our business community is better for the broader community. And so as we continue to grow and continue to be attractive for other businesses, other organizations to come to Sioux Falls, I'll go back to that word, artifacts. What artifacts do we have on the table? I remember the mayor saying about a year ago, you know, again, a company had called and said, you know, what companies are doing DE&I really well? Ask ourselves that question. How many companies could we point to as that company is an A+ on DE&I? And again, to say, do we have opportunity in that? And so again, the conversations that are happening in the chamber, and again, I give Jeff a lot of credit for helping drive a lot of this. You know, again, it doesn't happen overnight, right? It's a lot of constituencies that you have underneath the umbrella. But how do we start that conversation and keep that thing moving? And what I've seen in about a year or so that I've been a part of the chamber, it's one foot in front of the other. We are taking steps. We are seeing progress. It doesn't happen overnight, but it's commitment. There's a commitment to it, making sure, again, the board represents a more diverse population. We're making sure, again, we're looking for diversity in business, and ultimately, again, diversity in thought, which is a betterment of our entire community, so we can help learn from each other, get curious, help each other understand the backgrounds where we're coming from.
Ford Sioux Falls, a partnership with the Chamber, is investing in DE&I through the Innovation Center of Excellence. Jeff, can you provide some details on how that topic fits into the center and what you're going to be doing in the next 12 years? You've teased us a little bit with it, but dive in a little bit more. 12
years.
Or did I say 12 years?
That's great. No, that's good.
12 years,
you hear
12
that,
months.
Dan? 12 years. My chairman's here, so it's always good to.
Well, how about in the next year anyway?
No, it is going to take a long time. So last week, this is called a Center for Innovation and Excellence. So someone was asking me on my team, well, what specifically is it? Well, I don't know specifically, otherwise it wouldn't be innovative, right? It's the idea, I'm being somewhat redundant, but how do we where do we workshop ideas? Where's our think tank? We have, it's an apples to oranges comparison, but we have a very successful young professionals network that was born over 10 years ago. It's become a premier YPN in the nation. So we get a lot of input from them. When you hear a young professional story of how they ended up in Sioux Falls and stuck here, we need more of that, more of those stories told for diverse populations for staying here and having opportunities, attracting folks to move. Because in this nation has proved itself to be nomadic through history, but we need to take advantage of some of that right now as South Dakota, because if you're sitting with limited resources in another state, South Dakota may feel like the other side of the universe to you, but if we have word on the street through workforce development and arteries out into people-specific recruitment areas for their business, then we can, that builds, the success builds, and word of mouth helps drive that nationwide. So the Center for Innovation and Excellence within the Ford Sioux Falls campaign will be housed in the chamber, but diversity, equity, inclusion are a major portion of it, but also that entire energy and how it does coordinate the business community with the government. And I think that's the most beneficial work, I believe, at Chamber of Commerce, because neither one can exist in a vacuum, but together it moves forward positively.
Yeah, it's exciting
It's very exciting.
to see what can come of it.
Well, and most excitement is, I mean, obviously to get the financial commitments in, and that's going on track for Ford Sioux Falls, but to hear the energy from the investors about that topic, because with the Ford Sioux Falls, one of the challenges is, you know, the money comes in and people don't get to pick little pieces within. You're supporting the entire wealth of the project, and so it's good that those projects as well are diverse in their focus, and this has added a new flavor that the funders, investors are feeling very good about.
That's wonderful. And the summit is coming up. Who wants to tell us about the summit? This room needs to know all they can know about the summit.
I would be delighted to share that. So on April 15th, we are launching a Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Summit for business executives and business owners. And the purpose behind the summit is to give you information on the business case. If some business leaders are still not sure they're ready to get off the starting line, we've got a fabulous keynote speaker, Dr. Abdul Umari, who is a national consultant on DE&I, who's going to inform us all about the business case, as well as the humanity case. So our goal behind that is to really empower business leaders to know this is something important for us. After the keynote, I will have the honor to share what Pathways is going to do to support all of you over the next year. You'll hear the why it's important from Dr. Omari, and then the how we're going to help support all businesses over the next year with our DE&I Activator series, which is in partnership with the Chamber. And then finally, we'll have a handful of business leaders who are currently doing this practice in their business. Because I'm a firm believer, it's helpful to see how other people are doing this, so I might be able to see myself in the work. So really, it's our opportunity as a community, as a business community, to come together and all put our hands on the oars to row in this general direction together and really accomplish some amazing things over the next year.
Yeah. What I'm excited about this is when talking to Kira early on was setting the standard for CEOs and business owners to come, right? Historically, like it's easy to send HR, send somebody else. I was a part of those organizations where they kept their diversity and equity and inclusion. They had a number and it was a box. And it showed how important that really was. It was check the box. Having the summit on this level, it says, let's expand the box to be the organization. This is what we do. This isn't something that we just check a box on. This is who we are. And so really challenging ourselves as a business community, what is our strategy and how committed are we to it? What the work that Pathways is doing, if you don't know how to go about it, it's being shown. Here's something to plug into so you don't have to start from scratch. That's an awesome thing to be able to say, show up, be a part of the greater community so we can have our level of commitment as business owners as well as contributors to their community. So I think it's a great time to really show on that next step as Sioux Falls to say we're committed to this on a new level collectively.
So Cameryn, if a business leader said, why should I attend the summit, what would you tell him or her?
Can't afford not to.
give us a little more with that.
I mean, the first session is going to be amazing where we are going to start with the business case, right? So everyone wants to know, how is this going to impact my bottom line? We want to do the right thing. We have the right intent, but we don't want to make a misstep and then cause an error. Could we go the wrong direction? And how is this going to get me in the right direction? And so attending this training and this session and going along this series, as Kira had kind of noted, we're not just going to tell you and show you, hey, this is what you need to do, and it's really important. We're going to actually give you the tools in order to do that. Take it back. We're going to have sessions where you can call in and ask questions. How can I implement this? You know, I've been thinking through this strategy. What's the right approach for me? My business is this size. We're looking at these other companies that are different from mine. And then being able to talk with other executives from other groups where you'll actually have a community that will help you to develop that process that's right for you.
I love that. And we only have a couple minutes left. I'm going to ask one final question and let everybody jump in and answer it. Kira, I'll start with you if I could. The summit isn't the end of the DE&I efforts in our community. What is the summit the beginning of?
The summit is really the launching point. And what I get excited about being a community member in Sioux Falls is that we do things together. And that's often how we define our success. So if you can imagine a group of people in person and virtually committing together as a team, it's the launch of something that can be very transformational if we all get in to do it together.
Awesome. What would others add? What is this the beginning of?
I want to take it, it's a different nuance. It's adding some rocket boosters to a very important topic. And I'm not hearing this. I just want to make clear, as I talk about this with folks in the community, we're not bringing CEOs and business leaders at gunpoint and marching them in at this. You know, I had some very forward-thinking bosses of mine who have supported me and my team in making this happen. And they want to do more and want to do better and have the cutting edge and so forth. So I believe, and this is why we've chosen the route of not having a specific office for this work, because I want it to be the thread through everything that we do. And we know, I mean, there's simple conversation, well, it seems simple. A small, say a Mexican business owner, coming to a Chamber of Commerce event may feel very, very intimidating. And if we get somebody to bring them to that event, that's fantastic, and that's great. But more importantly, that at that event, they build relationships that then they take out in their daily life and growth and so forth. So this is a reinforcement of work that I think has always been a part of this Chamber of Commerce. Needs to be done better and looking towards the future and how the community is going to be more diverse.
I think it's a launching point of establishing a standard of excellence in this space, right? Again, we go back to, we keep making best places to live and all these great things that is phenomenal about Sioux Falls. How great would it be when we start making national news for what we're doing in this space? It's a launching point of saying we want to be excellent organizations, we want to be excellent communities, and folks who are excellent in the space are willing to go first, right? So now that we know there's opportunity, there's work to be done, we're showing the tools how to go about doing it. We have a chance to put everything else that we're doing behind this equally, to say we are also known for being a place. Sioux Falls, South Dakota does DE&I well? Yes. Come study the model, right? And so again, it's a chance to launch forward. We show ourselves excellence in so many ways. I think it's a launching point to bring this up to par with everything else that we do.
It's tremendous. And we're at 1 o'clock, and so I hope you'll all thank our panel for sharing so openly and bringing us into today's conversation. Thank you all for being here.
I think I speak for all of us. We know something special is happening in Sioux Falls economically, but there's something special happening here on this very topic. And I want to thank the leadership that is up here on this stage for leading Sioux Falls forward when it comes to DE&I. Please give them one more round of applause. Please join us next week where the program will be Lessons in Appreciating Cultural Diversity from the Teacher of the Year, Dr. Ann Robertson. Also, we have raffle tickets at the back of the room, so if you would like any, please reach out to Angie. Thank you all for being with us. This meeting is adjourned.